You might be familiar with ROTC programs in high schools and colleges. This way that you can, that kids can learn about the military and learn some skills and all that. It's a thing that maybe in your school, some people chose to participate in. But what about if they weren't choosing to participate? Turns out that's becoming more and more common. We have an example that's been profiled of a girl named Andreya Thomas on her first day of high school. It's a very young kid at this point. Looked over her schedule and found that she was enrolled in a class with J.R.O.T.C on it. She and other freshmen at Pershing High School in Detroit learned that they had been placed into the Junior Reserve Officers Training Corps, a program funded by the US military designed to teach leadership skills, discipline, and civic values, and open students' eyes to the idea of a military career. In these classes, by the way, you wear military uniforms, and it's an instructor, not a teacher. They might yell at you like they would in the military. Now, she said that when several of them pleaded to be allowed to drop the class, school administrators refused, telling them it was mandatory. And while these programs are available at over 3,500 high schools, which is already potentially a major issue, they're supposed to be electives that you choose to go into. But at more and more places have been identified, it is not an elective anymore. And you do not have to choose at all. You will be put into them and you have to stay, which I think we can all agree is sheer madness and cannot be accepted. What do you think, Francesca?
This is like, I mean, back when I was, when in the early 2000s, like working against the Iraq War, the war in Afghanistan, learning about the military recruitment industrial complex, right? Learning about how, ROTC programs, J.R.O.T.C programs as well will come to schools and they'll like put up a big, like this huge display. There'll be like a trailer with like games inside. There'll be people rappelling off the side of like your gymnasium. You're like, oh, whoa, what's that? There's video games you can play. There's all types of insidious ways that military recruiters get into schools. They're allowed, they have assemblies, they have days, etc. But mandating a class, immediately automatically enrolling students is completely a bridge too far. And we know the kinds of schools that these military recruiters are targeting. They are largely black and brown students. This is in Detroit. We know the pipeline from like, hey, you can't fund college, you don't have the money for it, join the military. And then eventually after we send you, to die in some wars for billionaires and oil, then maybe you can get a chance at going to college.
Yeah, this is just completely unacceptable. By the way, full disclosure, I participated in ROTC in college very briefly. It was for the Air Force. I didn't end up going to the Air Force. Clearly, I think we can all agree on that. But I chose to, okay, and then I chose to leave. But anyway, that's not what's happening here. This is, by the way, thousands of students. This is not like an oversight and Andrea got put in and that's it. It's thousands of students. They found dozens of schools that have made the program mandatory, or, and this is crazy, steered more than 75% of students in a single grade into the classes. So like the majority of students being forced to do this. This is not a couple kids to like pad out a classroom. This is now most kids' experience at dozens of schools. And as Francesca pointed out, a vast majority of the schools where this is happening are attended by a large proportion of non-white students and those from low income households. Right. And by the way, this is where I will move beyond the reporting that's now available, and you can find out more information at the New York Times. I will say, and this is speculation, I have no proof of this, they're definitely getting paid to do this. The military has been having trouble hitting their recruitment goals, and so they are going to schools in certain sorts of areas, the areas that they've always gone into to try to find potential soldiers, and I am sure they are transferring money to these schools.
Of course.
Or at least the schools better be getting paid if they're participating in this. But this needs to be a much bigger story. This cannot be allowed to continue. If you're worried about kids being propagandized to or groomed for various things, what the hell? Come on, this is supposed to be a choice thing.
Oh no,
any other thoughts?
You can be groomed to be cannon fodder for the United States military any day of the week. That's totally fine. But look, this is so insidious, particularly because of that. And we're on the other side of the passage of an $800 billion Pentagon budget, right? And yet the military is essentially, doing a form of bribery, a form of like, tit for tat, like giving schools money. Schools, public schools, largely in this country, who need the funds, who could use just a portion of that $800 billion that the Pentagon gets that never accounts for, and for textbooks, for teachers, for their students. And instead, they are forced to agree to things like this, automatic enrollment into J.R.O.T.C. in exchange for money. But they have to offer their kids up to not a life of a higher education, but a life of immediately enrolling into the US military. And it is, God, what a perfect distillation of the United States of America is this story.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like there's strong thematic ties to the military's attempt to get a much bigger presence on Twitch, like trying to make join the military and just play video games or whatever, which is not what it's like. And of course, I saw someone in the comments had mentioned that the military came out with a video game called America's Army years and years ago that was similarly designed to make it seem cool and fun and everything. The more and more trouble they have convincing younger people to join up, the more blatant and cringy these efforts are gonna be. But in this case, this isn't just more advertising or whatever, a free video game. This is mandatory. And so what about the principals at these schools? That they should be being asked tough questions. The school boards in these areas, what sort of deals have they signed that parents might not know about? This needs to be a much bigger story.
For more political news breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/thedamagereport. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.